A new Maimer today. So in this week, as we also spoke about in yesterday's Shiur, we learned the second Perek of Pirkei Avos, and we're going to learn a Maimer about the very same thing that we spoke about in yesterday's Shiur about Geula. We're going to learn a Maimer that speaks about this very same Mishnah in Pirkei Avos at the beginning of chapter 2. Rabbi says, Eizo Yishara Adam, what is a straight way, a straight path that a person should choose? Kol shi teferes lo yisa v'teferes lo min Adam. Any path that's beautiful for the one that does it, and it's beautiful for people. We'll soon explain what exactly the people over here is, according to Chassidus, what he's referring to. It's known the Maimer of my father-in-law, the Friedrich Rebbe from Shabbos Parshas Emor of the year 1940, that then it was the same, it came out the same way, like in the year that the Rebbe said the Maimer in Tafshin Memdal in 1984, it was also that they learned the second Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, they learned it on Shabbos Parshas Emor. Our year we're learning it on Shabbos Tazriya Mitzvah, but it doesn't really make a difference which Shabbos we're reading it. We're just talking about the Mishnah. So he says about this Mishnah, the Friedrich Rebbe talks about it. It's the beginning of the chapter of Pirkei Avos that's studied in this Shabbos. According to the custom, Lilmid Pirkei Avos ben Pesach la'atzeres, to study Pirkei Avos between the Yom Tov of Pesach and Shavuos, shu minig hashava l'chol nefesh. This is the minig to learn between Pesach and Shavuos. That is a custom that's equal to all. Everybody is known to do this. The loikam minig laskem chol shabbos zakayis shurak minig yesh noigim. Not like the custom to study Pirkei Avos all Shabbosim of the summer, which is something that is only called a yesh noyagim. It's only something that the Alter Rebbe says there are those that have that custom to learn it a whole summer. And the Rebbe continues, Medayik Sham, the Friedrich Rebbe analyzes over there. My kavanasi shol Rabbi, what's the intention of Rabbi Vebira derech ha'yishara sheyavar le'adam abayis Hashem, that in clarifying what is the straight way that a person should choose in the avodah of Hashem, shemedayik ba'amri derech yishara, that the Rebbe is specific to say that it's a straight way. We need to find what is the straight way in doing this. The mashma is that from this is indicated there's other ways in the service of Hashem. They are also considered good ways, but they're not necessarily straight. But Mailas Derech Zu Yishi Derech Yishara. And the advantage of this way that the Rebbe is talking about is that it's a straight way. We need to understand the concept behind that. V'gam, another question, another thing to analyze. Mao in Tiferes lo Yisah v'Tiferes lo min Adam. What's the idea that it's beautiful for the one that does it, and it's beautiful of the person? Harigam Oisel Koyala Adam Atzmai, also the one that's doing it is referring to the person himself. Kim Loshna Mishnah, like the Mishnah says, Eizoi Derech Yishara Sheyavar Loi HaAdam, what is considered a straight way that a person should choose? Kol Shi Teferes Lo Yisa, anything that is beautiful for the one that does it. In other words, we're talking about the Adam that he said right away at the beginning of the Mishnah. That Adam is considered the Oisah. That Adam is the one that's doing it. The Adam that chooses the way. What's he adding? And it's beautiful for him from the Adam. In other words, taking it in the literal sense. The meaning that it's explained in the Mishnah, it's talking about society versus the person himself. But if you just look at the word Adam, Adam seems to be the same thing he was saying before. So therefore, what's the difference between Tiferes Loi Me'isaham versus Tiferes Loi Mina Adam? So he says in the second paragraph, Lahavin calls them To be able to understand all of this, we first have to preface the Niksiv. It says in the Pasuk, Ki Yisharim Darchei Hashem, that the ways of Hashem are straight. It's explained at length in the explanations on the Zohar from the Mittler Rebbe, what's the concept behind the Yisharim Darchei Hashem. So the Mittler Rebbe explains the Inyan Shal Derech HaMitisu, what is the idea of a true road. So it's like we have a term that's called the King's Highway. It's not just an avenue in Brooklyn, but King's Highway means the way to be able to get to the royal city. That says, it joins the capital and the royal palace, until even the most private chamber in the office of the king himself, that's in the royal palace, with the most far-flung corner of the king's country. In every true road, it's going to be a two-lane highway. The king's highway has to be two directions, not just a one-way. It's a two-way street. The two movements of Rotzi V'Shuv, rushing towards Hashem, rushing towards the king, connecting to the king's palace, and then returning and bringing down to the rest of the world. Shal Yoda, that through that road, one reaches from the royal palace to the most far-flung corner. That's the Shuv, that's the return. And you get from the most far-flung corner to the palace of the king, which shows on the level of Rotzi. You're rushing towards the king. You're rushing towards Hashem. That's what it means when the pasuk says that it's the ways of Hashem are straight. What's the ways of Hashem that's referring to? The koyal Torah mitzvah says referring to Torah and its mitzvahs. Through the ways of Hashem, which is Torah mitzvahs, that's the way how a Jew joins with the royal palace, and not just with the royal palace, but with the king himself. That through Torah mitzvahs, a Yid joins with Hashem's very essence. That's what it says further in the pasuk. After it says Ki Yisharim Darchei Hashem, that the ways of Hashem are straight, and then it says who travels on those roads. It says afterwards Tzadikim Yelchu Bam, that tzaddikim will go on that path, on those ways that are straight. Who are the tzaddikim? The Koyal Yisrael. It's referring to Yidden. Not just some, lone tzaddik hiding out somewhere, but like we have right away before we say Pirkei Avos, we say Va'amech Kulam Tzaddikim. All your nation are tzaddikim. So it's all the Yidden travel on these straight roads to be able to reach not just the royal palace, but the king himself. Third paragraph on the page. V'hinei ba'avodas ha'Torah mitzvahs gufi yesh beis dargis. In the service of Torah mitzvahs itself, there are two levels. Kimevur b'hemshech ha'maimer, like it's explained in the continuation of the Maimer. The Mikara ki Ovid inish adaited and nafshik Ovid. Initially, when a person does his avodas Hashem, he's doing it on his own, for his own self, to be able to elevate himself. To repair his soul, to fix up his soul that descended below. That's what it means, the way that is beautiful for the one that's doing it, the person that's doing the mitzvah, that he should be beautified by it. By the way, in Lashon Kodesh and in Aramaic, the word tikkun will not just mean repair, but tikkunim could also mean jewelry, which is something definitely used to beautify. So there's the way the mitzvahs are meant to beautify the person that's doing the mitzvah. That's one level, that the person does it for their own benefit. And then, v'acharkach, and after the initial level, where a person is focused on the Torah mitzvahs for their own sake. He comes to a higher level. It says min ha'adam. It doesn't say tiferes loy min adam. Ha'adam is with the definitive article, the person. Ha'adam ha'yedua, meaning the known person. Who is this known person? The koy ala adam ha'elyon is referring to the supernal man. In other words, the man above Hashem himself. That means through the perfection and completion of the avodah down here below, and fulfilling Torah mitzvahs ideas of boiling gam b'adam ha'elyon. Through that we also influence and affect in the supernal man as well. This type of two-tiered types of ways of doing Torah mitzvahs is similar to what we spoke about in Tanya recently in Chitas, that the Alter Rebbe explained. First of all, there's the idea that I have such a love for Hashem, and the only way I can requite and quench my thirst for Hashem is to do Torah mitzvahs. In other words, so the Torah mitzvahs is to requite my love, to quench my love for Hashem. But then there's a higher level of Torah mitzvahs where he does it just for Hashem's sake, because Hashem wants a dir b'tachtonim, Hashem wants a unity above, etc., etc. So this is a similar type of thing. There's tiferes la'oseha, that it's for the person's own benefit, to repair the person, to beautify the person, and so on. And then there's the level of for Hashem's sake. And he goes on to say that we see that how Torah mitzvahs is also kaviyachol beneficial for Hashem. Like it's brought down the Zohar on the pasuk that man should do them and live through them. That's what it says in the pasuk. So the Zohar derives from the fact it's read asher yasa oisam ha'adam v'chai b'hem, which means that he is doing them, referring to the mitzvahs, and he lives through it. But oisam, the word oisam, atem ksiv, chaser, it's written as if it says atem without a vav, which means it could be read to be said that you are making. Meaning, what are you making through the mitzvahs? What is the Yid making through the mitzvahs? So he says, the Zohar says, Mailan yaleichem ki'ilu as'uni. The Hashem says that when a Yid does Torah mitzvahs, I consider it as if you made me. What does that mean, that you make me? In other words, we said there's a supernal man above. There's a level of the Adam Ha'elyon. When a Yid does Torah mitzvahs down here, which are connected to the 248 limbs, so he's doing the 248 mitzvahs, he also repairs and makes the supernal man above of the 248 limbs, etc., and organs. So that's where he says two lines in the bottom of the page, through the fulfillment of the 248 positive commandments, toil and binyan spheres the so we affect the building up of the spheres of Ze'er Anpin, of the spheres of Atzilus, that we build it up and we expand it and we give it more divine energy. And now he's going to bring, because according to Kabbalah, the spheres in Ze'er Anpin have a way how they have a combination of 248 levels. That's through Shem Tes Pa'amim Tes. There are 9 times 9. So he's just going to talk about Ze'er Anpin is the spheres above Malchus. So that's 9 spheres from Chachma till we get through Yesod. And every one of those 9 has 9 in them. So that's 9 times 9. Then Gimel Pamim, so you have 9 times 9 is 81. Gimel Pamim, 3 times 81. The reason why it's 3 times is because every sphere has Roish Toich V'Sof. It has the head, the top, it has the middle, and it has the end. So that's 3 times 81 is 243. And then you have a Heich Sodim HaMagdilim. Then you have, according to Kabbalah, you have the Hey levels, the 5 levels of Chesed that increase. Just like we know that according to Kabbalah and Chassidus, the right hand is the idea of Chesed, the left hand is the idea of Gvura. And there's 5 fingers at the end of the right hand. So those, just like there's 5 fingers in the physical hand, so too there's 5 levels of Chesed that causes that these 243 levels increase, and that's how you have the number 248. So when we do the 248 mitzvahs aseh down here, we complete and we perfect Hashem's 248 above. That's what it means, Tiferes Lo Mina Adam. It's not just improving me and elevating me and perfecting me, but it's also doing Tiferes Lo Mina Adam. It's beautifying, perfecting, completing, and the binyan of Zod that he calls. Okay, now as it's known, top of the next page, Shaydei Tfilas Adam, through the tefillah of a person. Lamata, down here below, Poyalim, we affect Sheyiyam, Lamaila Kodesh Baruch Hu Matzle, that when we daven down here below, we cause that Hashem should daven. That's what's brought down in Gemara Brachas. It's brought down. Valderach Zaydi Limit Torah Shalamata. Similarly, when a person studies Torah down here below, Kodesh Baruch Hu Kodesh V'Shoyne Kenegdechu. So Hashem is like sitting across him, like a study partner, a chavrusa, and he's also reading in Tanakh the same thing that he's reading, and he's repeating the Mishnayos and the Gemara, the same thing like the person is reading. And the same thing is with all mitzvahs, that every mitzvah that a person down here does, he causes Hashem to do those mitzvahs as well. And this is a lot of times the Rebbe brings from the Mezritcher Magi the concept Hashem Tzilcha, that Hashem is considered your shadow, just like a shadow mimics the movements of a person. The same thing, Kaviyachal, Hashem is our shadow. When we do a mitzvah, that causes Hashem to do the very same mitzvah above. So that's the Tiferes Lo Mina Adam, that we're beautifying and making Hashem have the mitzvahs as well. Second paragraph on the page. If we're going to add, we can add to this concept according to the explanation of the rest of the analysis of the expressions in this Mishnah. Move on. Seemingly, it's not understood much because of Tiferes Lo Leisa, that it's beautiful for the one that does it. Ma inyan asiyah etzel derech. What's the connection between doing and way? You're talking about a road. You're talking about a way. But in Yonishal derech v'pashtus, what's the idea of a road in the simple sense, in the literal sense? It's to go on the road, to travel on the road. The content of the Mishnah is, when it's asking what way should a person choose, it means what way should a person, what's a straight road that a person should choose to go in that road. So if so, he should have concluded when he says, Izeu derech yishara sheyav lo adam, kol she tiferes lehelchel, tiferes lo mina adam, leleches ba, and so on. Should use a term of travel, of going. V'im kein ma'ashem esayim lo yisel. Why does he talk about the one that does it? That's the one that's beautiful to the one, a way that's beautiful for the one that does it. When you're using the metaphor of a way, you don't use the metaphor of doing. But based on what we said before, it's now understood why he chooses specifically to use the term, the one that does it. Because the way that he's referring to over here is the way of Torah mitzvahs, the path of Torah mitzvahs. When we talk about Torah mitzvahs, it's specific, the idea of action and doing. Because the ultimate perfection and the intention in the giving of Torah mitzvahs is specifically in this physical world of action. Specifically in action. It's not about intention, it's not about kavanah. Kavanah is nice, intention is nice. But the main idea of Torah mitzvahs is doing it. Because we are in the world of action, and that's what's primary in the world of action. With this, we can also explain the expression of the Mishnah. What is considered a straight way that a person should choose? He specifically uses the term, what is the straight path that a person should choose? Why the word choice? Again, he could have said, what path should a person take? What path should a person walk on? What path is important? Why does he have to say specifically choosing? Because the idea of choice that he's referring to is also from the idea of choosing something from something else. The whole idea, it's referring to the choosing out and elevating and refining the sparks that's in this world. That's the whole idea of Torah and its mitzvahs, refining the world by choosing out the sparks of goodness in it. Third paragraph on the page, this will be understood closely. Why does it say over here, what is the straight path or the straight road that a person should choose? That what's the emphasis, ha'adam? Why does he have to emphasize the adam has to choose it? The mashma, this is indicated that specifically this road, this way, is in the capability and the power of a person and by his choice. So we're going to talk soon about there are certain paths which a person might be led down in. It's not by his choice. Just once he finds himself on that path, he needs to take that path as well. But that's not the path that a person should choose. Here, what the Rebbe is talking about is the path that a person needs to choose. The idea behind this is we just now said that there's the Yover Loya Adam. Yover Loya Adam is the idea of the avoid of Birurim and choosing out the sparks. Seemingly, when we talk about the avoida of elevating sparks, then there is the avoida of tshuva, which seems to be an even greater way of elevating sparks than through Torah mitzvahs. Tshuva is so high, tshuva is so powerful, it can even take intentional sins and turns it into merits, into mitzvahs, which means that it could refine those sparks that are normally not available and not ready, not able to be elevated. So there is an alternate type of way of birurim that's even better. Still in all we say, Eizeu derech yeshara sheyaver loy ha'adam. What is the Adam supposed to choose? What's his derech yeshara? It's Torah mitzvahs. Yesharim darchi Hashem that he spoke about. That darchi Hashem is going on Torah mitzvahs. Why not tshuva? If we're talking about birurim sheyaver loy ha'adam, tshuva is a much greater and higher level. So the Rebbe says, but tshuva is not something that I choose. Tshuva is if I landed in something that I wasn't supposed to do, so then I do tshuva. But you cannot choose tshuva initially. You cannot start off with tshuva melchatchila. So he says, אומר, 4 lines into the third paragraph concerning this, he says, Shezu ein derech yeshara sheyaver loy ha'adam. The way of tshuva is not the straight way that a person chooses. Ki ha'adam b'bchirasai asroi lachta v'lo. Because a person by his choice is prohibited from saying, I'm going to do an Aveda and I'm going to do tshuva. I want to do birurim, so let me do an Aveda and then do tshuva. That's prohibited. As it's known, someone that says, I will sin and do tshuva, that's the opposite of Torah. So therefore, you can't say about tshuva that sheyaver loy ha'adam, that a person should choose that. This advantage and greater birur of tshuva comes from above. It's not the person's doing. It's not sheyaver loy ha'adam. This is something that comes from above. What does it mean it comes from above? Didn't the person do the Aveda and isn't the person doing the tshuva? So the Rebbe says what he a lot of times brings in, that was all part of Hashem's scheme that the person should reach the tshuva, and that's why he fell through. Like the Chazal say on the pasuk, Adam, that there is a great scheme and plot against people, meaning that the whole idea that a person fell through an Aveda was like Hashem plotted this out, schemed that this should happen, even though, of course, he had freedom of choice, but Hashem led him like down that way. Specifically, it says this concerning the Chet Eitzadas. Iso b'Zohar, like it's brought down the Zohar Nefesh, Kisechta Tevaha, where it says in the Pasuk in Vayikra, a soul that will sin. So the Zohar says it's not a statement, a soul that will sin, but it's a soul that would sin, Tevaha, from the word Tema, it's a wonder. The Zohar says you got to put a question mark. That's how you have to read that pasuk. The Alpi Torah, because according to the Torah of truth, the Befrat Zohar, Pnimis HaTorah, especially the Zohar, the inner part of the Torah, Yesh Tmiya Kayemes Al Inyan Achetes and Lashmi Yisrael. There is an ongoing wonder about the idea of a sin by a Jewish person. So therefore, since a sin is really something out of the ordinary, so how did it come that a Yid did an Avera? El Shekol Inyan Achet U'B'chiras Noira Alilom U'Mayla. The whole idea of the sin is because there was an awesome plot and scheme that Hashem from above Kaviyachol entrapped the Yid to be able to reach that higher level of tshuva. Like it's explained at length concerning the joust that Hashem, when Mashiach comes, will make a joust between the Levyasan and the Shoir Abar, which is symbolic of the avoida of conquering and defeating the Klippa. Skip the parentheses. This joust indicates one of the types of delights and pleasures that Hashem has, which the joust symbolizes the defeat of Klippa that comes about by the inyan tshuva, that comes about through the idea of tshuva. For this reason, there's the idea of a sin. But still in all, after all is said and done, it's ein derech yishara. It's not considered the straight road. Mishum shi heipcha Torah, because it's the opposite of Torah, like we said before. Therefore, it's not also the way that a person should choose on his own. What's considered a straight path that a person has to choose, that doesn't come from above, that his job is to choose, that's the way of Torah mitzvahs. Last paragraph on the page. With this we can also explain why is it specifically Rebbe that said and taught this Mishnah. The idea of Rebbe was that he was the author of the Mishnayos, and the Rebbe brings down from the Rambam what brought about that Rebbe made the Mishnayos. Originally, it was there was a prohibition. One may not study the written Torah by heart, and one may not transcribe and write down the oral Torah as a book and as a sefer. So the Rambam said, if so, what motivated Rebbe to go against that prohibition? So the Rambam explains, like the Rambam writes in his introduction to his 14-volume Sefer of Mishnah Torah, since Rebbe saw that in his generation, because of the Romans, there were fewer students that had the capability and were able to attend learning, of boys, and all types of problems and sufferings were being renewed and coming upon the Jewish people, which also minimized Torah study. And Rome is expanding over the entire world, so like there's nowhere that's free of their influence, and they're making difficulty for Yidden to study Torah. It's getting stronger. And Yidden are in the meantime being, moving around and going to very far away from any organized place of Torah study. So the Rebbe was worried that the Torah Sheba'al Peh would be lost. The tradition and the oral transmission would be lost. Therefore, he authored the Mishnah until he wrote the Mishnah, because it says in the pasuk that when there's a time that a time to do for Hashem, they had to nullify your Torah, meaning even though according to Torah law we weren't allowed to write down the oral Torah, but to save Hashem's Torah, Rebbe understood that in this case you are allowed to write it down. Okay, as it's known, he says at the top of the next page in the brackets, sheyesh kama shittis, there are many opinions. Im Rebbe atzmei kosav mishnah rak chibra. Did Rebbe himself write down everything in the Mishnayos, or did the Rebbe just compile it from other writings that were already pre-existing Rebbe's time? The opinion of the Rambam is that in Rebbe's times it was already recorded, like the Rambam wrote, Rebbe compiled from all of these written and transcribed halachas, and he wrote them all down together. What does that have to do with our topic? So all of this, the Mishnah came about. Why was the Mishnah written? As a result of Gullus. What is Gullus? About descending into this world and transforming and elevating this world. So he says, third line from the top of the page, the Inyan Gullus Sharshi B'Ridasan Neshama Lamata B'Chlal. The idea of Gullus is rooted in the general idea of the Neshama descending down here below. That's where the whole idea of Gullus began, because that was the first Gullus. The Neshama coming to this world is coming into Gullus. Kedisa B'Tanya, like it's brought down Tanya, Shiridasan Neshama B'Chinas Gullus, that the very descent of the Neshama into the body is considered the Neshama is going into exile from its home in the spiritual realms. The Tachlis HaYirid, and the goal and the purpose of the descent of the Neshama into Gullus, Hibirur Aguf and Efshabamitz V'Chalke Ba'ilum, is to refine the body in his animal soul and his allotted portion in the world that he's supposed to refine. Since Rebbe was the one that compiled the Mishnah to be able to counteract Gullus, so therefore Rebbe was the one that pointed out that the straight way that a person has to choose, the avodas haberurim, is the derech haTorah mitzvahs, because that's the same idea. Rebbe was countering Gullus, and the whole idea of the Neshama going into Gullus was about the avodah of Torah mitzvahs, refining himself, his nefesh, his body, and his portion of the world. Second paragraph on the page. In addition to what we mentioned earlier, that the avodah of tshuva is about transforming the intentional sins to merits. Another thing about tshuva is it's an avodah that's beyond measure and boundary. It's breaking out of all limitations. And this is also something that Rebbe is pointing out. Also concerning this, Rabbi is referring to in the Mishnah and saying, the straight way that a person should choose for himself, it's the way of avodah and Torah mitzvahs in a measured, unlimited fashion, not in a way that blows the mind. Though there's an advantage in self-sacrifice, which is the idea of tshuva, which is the idea of going out of the box completely, not being limited, to give up one's life and to leave this world, that's insufficient. One needs to have this attitude of complete self-sacrifice and devotion to Hashem, needs to permeate and needs to be immersed and embedded in the inner avodah of Torah mitzvahs. It cannot be completely out of the box. We could say, we could say this idea of the above coming into the Torah mitzvahs is also hinted in what it says that it's beautiful for the one that does it. The Maram, that specifically the word le'oiseha, the Maram is kan le'inyan oiser retzayin shlomakim, that he hints over here for what the Chazal say, that in the first parsha of Krishma it's considered oisin retzayin shlomakim. We've learned this in other Mamorim, that it means they make Hashem's will what type of avodah makes Hashem's will? Avodah the b'chol moedecha. In the first parsha of Krishma it says b'chol moedecha, and the second parsha of Krishma it doesn't. Avodah b'chol moedecha, the Rebbe always emphasizes, ma'od means going out of the box, without limitations. When a person serves Hashem without limitations, so then he creates a new will by Hashem. Avodah samasiris nefesh l'mayim didvak bol, and avodah of self-sacrifice is beyond measure and boundary. But there's still le'oiseha, ubezeh omer losh nasir davke. Even in this avodah of going out of the box, he says the expression of action and doing. Just like when they make Hashem's will, it says doing. Why does it say the word doing? This approach of with all your might is not supposed to remain above measure and boundary. Like for example, Rashbi and his colleagues that were out of this world. That it says that they were teirasoi umnasoi, that their Torah was their profession, and they didn't engage with the world. And the Gemara says many tried like Rashbi, and it didn't work because you got to engage with the world. And many tried like Rabbi Shmuel, who said Toiv Toidem derech, you need to have Torah with engaging in the world, and that worked because that is for the majority of Yidden that it has to permeate this world, together with being out of this world, has to permeate this world. It has to come down not just to be out of this world, but it should fill your heart and fill your soul. It should permeate the person, the pnimius. Until it comes down in the idea you shall gather your grain that we talk about in the second parsha of Krishma. So from the b'chol meidach of the first parsha of Krishma, that is out of the box, it has to come into the person's avodah, into the physicality of this world. It should permeate even matters of this world. In an orderly fashion, a way of step by step. For this reason, the Rabbeinu HaKodesh had authored and compiled the 6 orders of the Mishnah. Emphasis on the word orders. The Mudgish Kan Inyan HaSeder. It's emphasized over here the idea of order, and Rebbe was the first one to compile Torah Halacha, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, based on topic. He made 6 orders of the Mishnah. There's the topic that has to do, the first thing is Royim, agricultural things. The second thing has to do with appointed times of the year, beginning with Shabbos, and then all other Yom Tovim, and so on. And then every one of those Darim have subsections. In Moed, there's the Masech that has to do with Shabbos, and there's the Masech that has to do with Pesach, and the Masech that has to do with Yom Tov, etc., etc. So, what's the idea behind it? Because Rebbe was about taking the beyond and putting it in an order. Because the avodah is that it should come down specifically in a level of order. Though the Chazal say concerning that there's maidens to no end, it's referring to the Torah Sheba'al Peh, that the halachas cannot be limited. It has infinite amount of halachas, but even those unlimited amount of halachas need to be put in its own order. Do you belong in Seder Zeroim? Do you belong in Seder Noshim, and Seder Taris, and Seder whatever? Seder still has to be in an organized fashion. Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, the 6 orders of the Mishnah, Seder V'Gvul, in an order in a limited way. The Rebbe concludes with a bracha, V'idei avodah b'derech Hashem is managol, through the avodah in the way of Hashem in the time of Golus, Boim b'karav mamish shel shleimus haderech shetir b'mais Mashiach, will come speedily to the completion and the perfection of the way that's going to be in the days of Mashiach. The Oz Sham Nasal Fnach Mitzvah, then we will do over there like the mitzvahs of your will, Shleimus HaMitzvahs. It will be when Mashiach comes, the perfection of the mitzvahs. Mishum Shekol and Yan Sheba Olam Yu B'Taksla Shleimus, because all matters in the world will be in the ultimate perfection. Hein and Yan Sheba Hamois Mitzvah Mitzvah Veino Adam Atzmai. Both the objects with which we fulfill the mitzvahs will have reached a higher state. And the same thing, the person fulfilling the mitzvahs will obviously be in a more elevated state than he was before Mashiach came. Though initially when a person does, like we said, he's doing it for his own soul elevation, still will be then the idea of initially to go over Shleimus Avodah, the ultimate service. That it'll be totally for Hashem's sake. And in this perfection, there'll be the idea of a road. What's the idea of a road? Traveling. Traveling means rising higher and higher. Like it says, they'll go from strength to strength. Doesn't just mean that the beginning of the avodah remains. In other words, I'm progressing, but my avodah that I did yesterday has nothing to do with the progress. No. Also, the beginning of the avodah, the first step in the avodah, is elevated along with myself when I keep on going. Let's explain in a different place concerning counting of the Omer. Why do we say today is 2 days to the Omer? We should say today is the second day of the Omer, today is the third day of the Omer. We don't say that. We talk about it in a cumulative fashion. Why? Because in the second day, also the first day of the Omer becomes elevated and becomes one of the 2 days of the Omer, which means on day 2, day 1 got an aliyah as well. Day 14, all the 13 days of the Omer prior to that were elevated as well, and so on. So too, it's in the avoid of a person now. Not just when Mashiach comes, that we were talking about before, but even now. Through our avodah, we make peace both in the heavenly court and the court down there below, the koil, what the Chazal is referring to, the court of heaven and the court down there below, it's referring to the peace between the godly soul and the animal soul. That's what it says in the Torah. In our days of Boim L'Shleimus Hashem, the lawsuit, through this we come to the ultimate peace of Mashiach's times. Yom Shekul Shabbos Menucha L'Chayelam, a day that's entirely Shabbos and rest forever. And afterwards we go up even higher. That says Talmid Chacham Ein La Menucha. Instead of just being a day of rest, it says Talmid Chachamim do not have any rest. Going up from strength to strength. Be the will of Hashem. That this should be all this speedily in our days in a way that immediately they'll be redeemed. And in joy and in gladness of heart.